At Thanksgiving, my billionaire grandfather yelled at me. I froze and said, "I have no idea about it." At that moment, my family went silent. Then the lawyer arrived. "Grace," he said, his voice cold and controlled. "Explain this right now." I froze. My fork hovered in midair. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the fake warmth of family. Everything vanished in an instant. Every face turned toward me. My parents, my aunt, my cousins, all waiting for me to confess to something I didn't even understand. I have no idea about it," I said, my voice barely louder than a breath. For a moment, no one moved. Then, I saw it. My grandfather's expression didn't soften. It hardened, not with anger, but with disappointment. The kind that tells you something much bigger is about to fall apart. Before anyone could speak, the front door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped inside, holding a briefcase. "I'm the family lawyer," he said calmly. "And this conversation can't wait." That was when I knew Thanksgiving was about to destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. The silence felt heavier than my grandfather's shout. No one rushed to defend me. No one laughed it off as a misunderstanding. No one said, "Dad, you must be confused." They just sat there. My mother's hand tightened around her wine glass. My father stared at the tablecloth, as if the pattern suddenly required his full attention. Across from me, my aunt pressed her lips together, her jaw locked so tight I could see the muscle twitch. That was when it hit me. They weren't shocked. They were scared. "Grandpa," I said carefully, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I really don't know what you're talking about. I've never owned anything expensive in my life." He didn't answer right away. He studied me the way he always had, quietly. Intensely, like he was reading between every word I spoke. "Grace," he finally said, slower now. "3 years ago, I bought a property. I put it in your name. Not as a gift you could waste, but as protection. Something no one could ever take from you." My chest tightened. "That's impossible," I said. "I was living with roommates back then. I couldn't even afford my car repairs." "I know," he replied. That single sentence sent a chill through me. If he knew how broke I was, then how could this be true? I turned to my parents. "Mom, Dad, please tell me what he's talking about." My mother smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "this really isn't the right time. You're already overwhelmed." Overwhelmed. That word again? It was the same word she used when I asked why my credit applications kept getting rejected. The same one she used when I lost a job offer without explanation. The same one she used whenever I pushed too hard for answers. "I'm not overwhelmed," I said. "I'm confused." My father finally looked up. "Grace, it's Thanksgiving," he said. "We can talk about finances another day." "Finances?" That's when my grandfather leaned forward. "Finances," he repeated. "Is that what you're calling it now?" His tone was calm, but I'd heard it before during board meetings, during negotiations that ended with entire companies folding. "You told me," he continued, looking directly at my parents, "that Grace was not emotionally stable enough to manage large assets. This is the step that mining zing, and the steepest was help you." The air vanished from the room. I felt like I'd been slapped. "You said what?" I whispered. My mother sighed as if I were the one being difficult. "We were worried about you. You've always been sensitive." Sensitive. I thought about the nights I cried alone, convinced my struggles were proof that something was wrong with me. That I just wasn't built like the rest of them. And suddenly, a terrifying thought surfaced. What if none of it was an accident? "What exactly did you tell him?" I asked, my voice shaking now despite my efforts. My aunt cleared her throat. "Grace, you're taking this too personally." That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something carefully hidden. Something everyone at this table knew about except me. And whatever it was big enough to make my billionaire grandfather bring a lawyer to Thanksgiving dinner. The room felt smaller, like the walls were slowly closing in. "I'm not taking anything personally," I said, my fingers curling into my palm under the table. "I'm asking a simple question. Why am I hearing about a property in my name for the first time in my life?" No one answered right away. That pause was louder than any argument. My mother exchanged a glance with my father. Quick, practiced. The kind people don't even realize they're doing when they've shared secrets for years. Grace, my father said, finally lowering his voice, you've always had trouble handling stress. You remember how hard things were after college? I remembered. I remembered working late shifts, eating instant noodles, and pretending everything was fine because asking for help always turned into a lecture about building character at 2 in mining. But that doesn't explain this, I said. If Grandpa bought something for me, why wasn't I told? My aunt leaned forward. Because you weren't ready. The words hit me harder than I expected. Ready for what? I asked. To know the truth? My cousin laughed nervously. You're twisting this, Grace. No one was trying to hurt you. I looked around the table. Then why do I feel like I've been lied to my entire life? My grandfather hadn't said a word. He just watched. That scared me more than anything. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away. You don't understand, she said softly, switching to the tone she used when she wanted me to doubt myself. You were fragile back then, emotional. We were afraid money would ruin you. Ruin me? I repeated. Yes, she said. We thought it was safer if someone more stable handled things. The implication was clear. Not me. My chest tightened as memories rearranged themselves into something ugly and unfamiliar. Job interviews that ended abruptly. Credit checks that failed for reasons no one could explain. Doors that closed just before I reached them. What exactly did you handle? I asked quietly. My father cleared his throat. We made decisions in your best interest. That phrase again, in your best interest, it suddenly sounded less like concern and more like a warning. So, while I was struggling, I said, you were making decisions about my future without telling me. You should be grateful, my aunt snapped. Other people don't get that kind of protection. Protection? I almost laughed because nothing about my life had ever felt protected. My grandfather finally spoke. Grace, he said gently, did you ever receive my letters? My heart skipped. Letters? I wrote to you every month, he said. I asked how the house was treating you, if you needed anything. The room went cold. I never got a single one, I said. My mother's face drained of color. My grandfather turned slowly toward my parents. Then someone, he said calmly, has been lying to both of us. No one argued. No one denied it. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. This wasn't about one property. This was about years of control, quiet manipulation, and a version of my life that had been carefully edited without my consent. And we still hadn't opened the lawyer's briefcase. The lawyer hadn't said a word since he arrived. He stood near the doorway, calm, patient, as if he knew exactly how this would unfold, and was simply waiting for the right moment to step in. His briefcase rested at his feet, untouched. But somehow it felt like the heaviest object in the room. My grandfather turned to him. Ethan, he said, his voice steady. Please, that was all it took. The lawyer stepped forward and placed the briefcase on the dining table, right between the half-eaten turkey and the untouched cranberry sauce. The soft click of the locks echoed louder than any shout. I'll keep this simple, Ethan said. Because what's inside is not. He opened the case and removed a stack of documents carefully arranged, color-coded, precise. This wasn't a conversation. It was an investigation. 3 years ago, he began. Mr. Richard Collins purchased a lakeside property valued at just under $3 million. I'm said chin. My breath caught. Purchased, he continued. In the name of Grace Collins, every muscle in my body went rigid. That's not possible, my father said immediately. Grace would remember signing something like that. Ethan nodded. You're absolutely right. He slid one document toward me. Miss Collins, he said. Does this signature belong to you? I leaned forward, my hands trembling as I looked down. It was my name, but it wasn't my handwriting. No, I said quietly. I've never signed this. My mother laughed softly, the sound thin and forced. This is ridiculous. Grace forgets things all the time. I looked at her. Really? Looked at her. You taught me how to sign my name, I said. You know that isn't mine. The table went silent again. Ethan continued as if no one had spoken. 6 months ago, ownership of that property was transferred to another family member for the amount of $1. $1. My aunt's chair scraped loudly as she shifted. That transfer, Ethan added, was filed using documentation printed less than a year ago. My grandfather's eyes narrowed. Explain. Most modern printers embed identification codes, Ethan said calmly. They record the date and time of printing. This document was created 6 months ago. My father stood up abruptly. This is insane. You're accusing us of crimes over paperwork errors. Sit down, my grandfather said, his voice dangerously quiet. My father sat. Ethan turned another page. In addition, he said, funds intended to support Grace's early loan payments were redirected. I felt dizzy. Redirected where? To a private account, Ethan replied. Under a family member's name. I knows of it tune. And that my mother's hand flew to her mouth. That's not what it looks like, she said quickly. We were managing things temporarily. Temporarily? I asked. For 3 years? My voice cracked. I thought about all the nights I lay awake calculating bills, wondering how everyone else seemed to move forward while I stayed stuck in place. You told me to be patient, I said to my parents. You told me struggling would make me stronger. No one met my eyes. Ethan closed the folder and looked directly at my grandfather. This is no longer a family matter, he said. It's a legal one. My grandfather nodded slowly. And in that moment, I realized something I should have understood years ago. My family hadn't underestimated me. They had deliberately kept me powerless. And now, for the first time, the truth was no longer something they could talk their way around. It was written in ink, and we were only at the beginning. For a long moment, no one spoke. The documents lay there on the table like silent witnesses, heavy with truths no one wanted to touch. I stared at them, my mind racing backward through the last 3 years, replaying moments that suddenly looked very different. So, that's why, I said slowly. Everyone looked at me. That's why every apartment application failed, I continued. Why my credit score kept dropping, even though I paid everything on time. Why I could never get ahead no matter how hard I worked. My mother shook her head. Grace, you're jumping to conclusions. Am I? I turned to Ethan. Were there any other irregularities? He hesitated for just a second, long enough to tell me the answer wouldn't be easy. Yes, he said. There were communications sent to multiple financial institutions and employers. My heart pounded. Communications from who? From this household, he replied calmly. Emails expressing concern about your emotional stability and long-term reliability. The room erupted. That's a lie. My father shouted. We would never sabotage our own daughter. I laughed, a sharp hollow sound that surprised even me. You already did, I said. You just called it protection. My aunt stood up. This has gone too far. Grace has always been dramatic. Everyone knows that. I turned toward her. Did you know I cried in my car after every rejection letter? That I thought something was fundamentally wrong with me? She didn't answer because the answer didn't matter. What mattered was that no one had stopped it. My grandfather closed his eyes, his face drawn tight with something that looked like regret. You told me, he said quietly, that Grace was unstable, that she needed supervision. My mother's voice broke. We were afraid. Afraid of what? I asked. She looked at me, then really looked at me, and for the first time, her expression wasn't controlling or dismissive. It was calculating. That if you became independent, she said carefully, you wouldn't need us anymore. The words landed like a final piece snapping into place. It wasn't about my safety, it was about leverage. So, you kept me small, I said. You made sure I stayed dependent. My father slammed his hand on the table. We're still your parents? Yes, I replied. And parents are supposed to protect their children, not trap them. Ethan spoke again, his tone even professional. There's one more thing, he said. The property in question was not vacant. My stomach dropped. Who's living there? Ethan glanced at my aunt. A relative by marriage, he said. They've been residing there under the belief that the property was lawfully transferred. The room spun. So not only was something stolen from me, I said, my voice trembling now, it was being used. While I was barely getting by, my grandfather stood up slowly. This ends tonight, he said. The authority in his voice silenced everyone. I will not allow another minute of this deception. My parents began speaking at once. Apologies, excuses, overlapping justifications. But he raised one hand. No, he said. You've spoken enough. I felt tears burn behind my eyes. Not from weakness, but from clarity. All those years I thought I was failing. I wasn't. I was being managed, controlled, and now for the first time, the people who had written my story without my consent were losing the pen. And I knew deep down that whatever came next would change every relationship at this table forever. My hands were shaking. Not because I was afraid anymore, but because something inside me had finally snapped into place. "Wait," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chaos better than a shout. Everyone turned toward me. For most of my life, this was the part where I stayed quiet, where I let older voices decide what was best, where I swallowed my questions and told myself that peace was more important than truth. "Not tonight. I need to say something," I continued. "And for once, I need all of you to listen." My father opened his mouth. My grandfather raised a hand, stopping him. "Go on, Grace," he said. I took a breath. "I spent years believing I was weak," I said slowly. "That I couldn't handle responsibility, that I was too emotional, too sensitive, too unstable." I looked directly at my mother. "You made sure I believed that." She shook her head, tears spilling over. "Grace, you're twisting." "No," I said firmly. "I'm remembering." The room went silent again. I remember asking why my job offers disappeared. I remember asking why my credit kept failing. I remember you telling me I just needed to try harder. I turned to my father, and I remember you saying that independence wasn't everything, that family should take care of me. My voice rose, not in anger, but in disbelief. "Do you know what that did to me?" I asked. "It taught me to doubt every instinct I had." My aunt stood abruptly. "This is emotional manipulation," she snapped. "You're trying to make us the villains." I laughed softly. "No," I said. "I'm just finally telling the story without your edits." Ethan stepped forward again, his voice calm but unyielding. "There's something else the family should know," he said. My heart pounded. "What is it?" "The redirected funds," he explained. "They weren't occasional. They were systematic, monthly, automatic." My mother let out a sob. "You used my name," I said slowly. "To control money meant for my future." My father slammed his fist against the table. "Enough. You're acting like criminals are sitting here." Ethan didn't flinch. "Forgery," he said. "Financial misrepresentation, interference with employment opportunities." Each word landed like a verdict. "These are not misunderstandings," he continued. "They are documented actions." I felt something unexpected. Then relief. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to convince anyone of my reality. The facts were doing it for me. My grandfather stood. "I trusted you," he said quietly to my parents. "I trusted you with her." They both looked at the floor. "You told me Grace needed guidance," he continued. "But what you really wanted was control." My mother fell to her knees beside her chair. "We were afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of losing our place in the family." I looked down at her. "You didn't protect me," I said. "You protected your power." The words felt final. Ethan closed his folder. "At this point," he said, "we have more than enough to proceed legally." The room erupted again, pleading, bargaining, frantic promises, but I didn't hear them because something else was happening. I was standing straight. My shoulders weren't hunched anymore. My voice didn't tremble. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for permission to exist. I turned to my grandfather. "Whatever you decide," I said. "I just want one thing." He looked at me gently. "What's that, Grace?" "The truth," I said. "Out in the open. No more silence." He nodded once. "That ends tonight." And in that moment, I knew no matter what happened next, they would never be able to make me small again. The room didn't explode after that, it collapsed. Not with shouting or chaos, but with a heavy, suffocating quiet that pressed against my ears. The kind of silence that follows when there's nothing left to deny. Ethan straightened the documents on the table. "From this point forward," he said calmly, "everything will proceed through legal channels." My father swallowed hard. "You don't need to do this," he said, his voice low. "We can fix it quietly." Quietly. The same word that had buried the truth for years. "No," Ethan replied. "That option no longer exists." He turned toward my grandfather. "Mr. Collins, if you approve, we'll file for immediate asset recovery and initiate a full financial audit." My grandfather nodded without hesitation. "Do it," he said. My mother reached for him. "Richard, please." We're family. He looked at her, then really looked at her, and his expression didn't harden. It emptied. Family doesn't behave this way, he said quietly. Family doesn't build a cage and call it protection. I felt tears sting my eyes, but they didn't fall, Ethan continued, his voice steady, almost gentle. The property will be returned to Grace's name, effective immediately. Any income derived from its use will be calculated and repaid. Additional damages will be assessed. My aunt shook her head in disbelief. You're destroying this family. No, I said softly. You already did. This is just the part where everyone sees it. For the first time, no one argued with me. My father sank back into his chair, his shoulders sagging. My mother covered her face with her hands. Whatever roles they'd been playing, guardians, decision-makers, protectors, were gone. They were just people facing the consequences of their choices. Ethan closed his briefcase. Investigators will follow up within 48 hours, he said. Until then, I strongly advise everyone to refrain from contacting Grace. He looked at me. You're safe now, he said quietly. Safe. The word felt unfamiliar but welcome. My grandfather came to stand beside me, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, he said, not just to me, but to the version of me that had been struggling in silence for years. You won't have to fight alone anymore. I nodded, finally allowing myself to breathe. Around us, the Thanksgiving table sat untouched cold food, spilled wine, broken traditions. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I was losing something. I felt like I was getting my life back. And I knew the next chapter wouldn't be about survival anymore. It would be about rebuilding on my terms. A year has passed since that Thanksgiving night. Sometimes it feels distant, like a story I once heard about someone else. Other times it feels close enough that I can still hear my grandfather's voice echoing across the table. Still feel the weight of that silence pressing down on my chest. I'm standing on the deck of the lakeside house now, the one that was meant to protect me, then used to trap me. The water stretches out in front of me, calm and unbothered, as if it never witnessed the lies built around it. The legal process was long, painfully long. There were interviews where I had to repeat things I'd spent years trying not to remember. Bank statements that showed how carefully my life had been managed without my consent. Emails that proved my instincts hadn't been paranoia, they'd been warnings. Some days I left meetings feeling empowered. Other days I sat in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel, wondering how people who claimed to love me could have been so methodical in keeping me small. But I kept going because for the first time, no one was telling me to stop asking questions. The house was officially returned to me within months. Every document came with an explanation. Every decision required my approval. No one spoke for me anymore. That alone changed everything. The funds that had been taken were restored along with compensation ordered through the settlement. I paid off my student loans in full. When I saw the balance reach zero, I didn't celebrate. I just sat there staring at the screen, realizing how much fear had shaped my choices for so long. Fear of failing, fear of needing help, fear that maybe they were right about me. It took time to unlearn that. I didn't rush into a new life. I rebuilt it slowly. I worked with therapists and financial advisors not because I was unstable, but because healing deserves structure too. I started a consulting practice almost by accident. At first I just shared my experience online carefully, anonymously. People responded in ways I didn't expect. Messages from strangers who had been told they were irresponsible, emotional, incapable by partners, parents, siblings. People who had learned to doubt themselves the same way I had. So, I made it official. Now, I help people understand contracts, finances, boundaries. I teach them how to protect themselves, not just legally, but emotionally, how to recognize when concern turns into control. The work fills my calendar faster than I ever imagined. More importantly, it fills something inside me that used to feel permanently empty. My grandfather visits often. We've rebuilt our relationship carefully. Honestly, there are things we don't talk about yet, and that's okay. Trust doesn't come back all at once. One evening, as we watched the sun disappear behind the lake, he said something that finally let me forgive myself. You weren't weak, he said. You were isolated. There's a difference. I think about that often because for so long I believed my struggle was a personal failure. Now I understand it was a system designed to keep me dependent, and I survived it. This house no longer feels like evidence in a case or a symbol of betrayal. It feels quiet, safe, mine. For the first time in my life, I'm not bracing for the next loss. I'm planning, And that might be the greatest freedom of all. Thanksgiving doesn't feel the same anymore. For most of my life, it was a performance. A table full of people pretending everything was fine, smiling through discomfort, avoiding the truths that threatened the image of family. I thought that was normal. I thought silence was respect. I was wrong. Silence can be a cage. That night taught me something I wish I'd learned sooner. Love doesn't require you to shrink. And protection never comes with secrecy or fear. When someone controls your access to money, information, or opportunities, that isn't care, it's power. What saved me wasn't anger or revenge. It was truth documented and undeniable. It was the law stepping in where emotions failed. It was one person willing to say, "This ends here." I don't tell this story to punish anyone. I tell it because there are people listening who are being told they're too emotional, not ready, or incapable of managing their own lives. If that's you, please hear this. Being hurt doesn't make you weak. Needing clarity doesn't make you difficult. And asking for protection is not the same as giving up control. Today, my life is quiet in a way that feels honest. I choose who has access to me financially, emotionally, legally. I no longer confuse loyalty with silence. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: you are allowed to know the truth about your own life. You are allowed to ask questions. And when the truth comes out, healing can finally begin. That to me is what gratitude really looks